Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the Gotta Look Up podcast. I am your host, Tom Campbell. It is my honor to introduce Bob Goff as my first interview guest. Bob, you're my first interview guest. Thank you very much for that.
That's awesome. Thanks a million for having me on.
Yeah, the purpose of the Gotta Look Up is to get people looking up from their devices and then reconnecting with the world around them. So looking around and then looking ahead at a brighter future. And then also look up higher if need to for more spiritual growth. And so, what you talk about, Bob, in your books and things and the activities you do around the world really feeds into that message. So I'm happy to have you here today to talk about this.
Oh, this is great. Yeah, I think the idea of distraction, we get distracted by the things going on inside of us and around us. And some of the things inside of us, we need to figure out a way to control those. And it can be a little bit harder, but controlling some of the things around us, devices and screens and all that, we can just be really strategic. And here's the deal. You can have a hope without a plan is just a wish.
Exactly.
So hope without a plan is a wish. I just keep reminding myself of that every day.
So for the audience, I recently attended one of Bob's writers' retreats at his place, the Oaks in San Diego, which is a very special retreat. They've got lots of different activities for families, for couples. If you're burnt out and you want to just kind of get away and reconnect, I suggest you take a look at their website, and we'll put that up on the show notes so you can find it. But had a wonderful time there. I was first introduced to Bob through some people that were trying to get a meeting with me at a work trade show, and there really wasn't a lot for me to do with them, so I kind of avoided the meeting. But they tracked me down, and it became the most productive discussion I had because they said, "Have you heard of Bob Goff?" Because we were talking about charity and doing good in the world, and I was trying to do some things around helping elephants. And I said, "No, I haven't." And they said, "Read his book, Love Does." So this is my first introduction to Bob. I highly recommend getting the book. You can find his other books on your favorite bookstores as well. Bob has written a book called Love Does, Everything Always, and Love Does for Kids. A little bit more about Bob. He's the honorary consul of the Republic of Uganda, which is an interesting story we'll get into. He's an attorney, founder of the Love Does nonprofit group, which builds houses and schools and does lots of things around the world in Uganda, India, Nepal, Iraq, and Somalia. And I mentioned he runs several workshops. He does a lot of prison outreach in San Quentin. He's a lover of balloons, cake pops, helping people pursue their big dreams. Bob's greatest ambition in life is to love others, to do stuff, and most importantly, to hold hands with his wife, Sweet Maria Goff, who's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Got to meet her as well, and spend time with his kids. For more information on Bob, check out bobgoff.com and lovedoes.org. So, Bob, your life is so fascinating to me, and I have some questions I want to ask you, but I want to keep it very interactive. If you have questions for me, we can go back and forth. There's two things that really grasp me about you. One is that you hold office hours on Tom Sawyer Island in Disneyland. So if you could talk about that a little bit. And then the other is the honorary consul to the Republic of Uganda. So
Yeah,
question.
crazy, unlikely stuff. Yeah. So the really high value for me is availability. I'm never the smartest guy in the room, but it can always be the most available guy in the room. And so for each of us too, you can decide, you know what, it's not going to cost me a nickel, but it'll cost me 5 minutes to be available. And I don't know, I feel like everybody's got 5 minutes. I don't know, like somebody gets a bit part in a movie and then all of a sudden you're talking to their agent or their keepers, or somebody sings a song that rhymes and now they're big shot. And I just feel like when I look at the life of Jesus, he was always available. And then I know some people say, but then he went to a quiet place to rest. And that lasted like 15 minutes. And then 5,000 people showed up saying, well, what do we eat? So I really like that idea of availability. And so I just decided Wednesdays from 10 to 2 will be my time. And you get to decide how and when you'll be available. And I just decided Tom Sawyer Island at Disneyland. It's just a really endearing, fun. If somebody wants to meet, I'm not going to meet in some boardroom in Wilshire Boulevard. If they don't want to come to downtown Disney or Tom Shore Island. We're just not going to meet. And I'm not mad about it. Just like, what if we just became super available? And you could do that at a Starbucks. You could do that, hang a walkie-talkie from a tree somewhere on the campus where you're a chaplain or a professor, or if you work at General Motors, just be the one person that's just super available. Um, and then I think that availability kind of leads to these opportunities. And so I bet 20 years ago now, they asked me to be the consul general for the Republic of Uganda, which is kind of funny because I'm not a Ugandan, obviously, but I'm not the US representative to Uganda. I'm the Ugandan representative to the United States, which cracks me up still when I walk into embassies. They're like, where's the Ugandan guy? I'm like, I'm the Ugandan guy. So availability leads to these neat opportunities. And what you need to do is just catch the butterfly when it goes by, just net that thing.
Yeah.
I'll leave for the Middle East here in a day or two, for a week or two. And there's just a lot of tough stuff going on. And so why not just be around and be available in different ways that might be helpful? Who knows? And
Yeah.
there's something just beautiful and winsome. You don't have to have credentials. You don't have to be a big shot. Nobody needs to know your name. But somehow, if you're known as someone really safe, and Tom, you would be one of those people, you're just known as a really safe guy. What a great thing to aspire to.
No, I appreciate you saying that. I've come to this realization lately, um, that, and again, there's power in community with religion and praying together. But for me, it's always been a one-on-one relationship. And I've always said, regardless of what religion you pick, it's still that one-to-one relationship. And I've had people ask me to sponsor them for confirmation. And I get them a Bible, and I always write in it, don't let man-made institutions get in the way of your relationship with your creator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, you have these scriptures say God doesn't dwell in buildings made by men. Yet we have 10, $15 billion of buildings made by men.
yeah.
Just kind of hoping there was a couple women on the workforce there. So, like that idea that you could find some peace and some great depth of understanding, some reflection in a quiet redwood forest. You aren't going to find any peace and quiet at Starbucks, but you might find it at a park. But some people actually operate a little better when there's a little bit of background noise. I know I sleep a little better when there's some background noise. And so just find what's working for you. And it's not a like a straw man poll that we're taking, like what works for everybody else. Find things that work for you and then just do a bunch of that.
So in love does there's a bunch of lines. I actually have a list of Bob Goff sayings in my computer that
Oh, that's awesome. Honored.
um, and I have to buy new highlighters every time you come out with a book because it's all yellow. I might as well just dip it in yellow.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
so one of the things you mentioned is God doesn't want us to be typical. So can you expand on that? Because yeah, there's 8 billion of us, and we're all 8 billion unique codes, and
Yeah.
we can't all be the same. We're all given certain gifts. But that's one of the things that struck me and got me thinking about, okay, what gifts do I bring that I'm not sharing that I need to share?
Yeah, so we can't. I think it's in our primal nature to look around to see what's going on. There's probably some guy in a cave somewhere back in the Neanderthal age, and his neighbor in the cave next to him had a like a pet, and it was a T-Rex, and he used to pet it on the nose. And then one day his friend just wasn't there anymore. And so the guy in the cave next door said, don't get a T-Rex as a pet because it will get you. And so there's a certain amount of seeing what's going on and triangulating of what other people are doing. And then we can kind of go around the bend on that. And then what we become is the average of our three most insecure friends. And what I don't want to do is be the average of anybody. Just want to, and again, faith is an important thing to me. I'm not trying to talk other people into or out of it, but Paul, one of the guys that wrote 13 of the books in the Bible, he was talking to his buddy Timothy, and he said, fan the flames of the unique gift that God's given you. And so just like you, Tom, are fanning the flames on your unique gift, I'm trying to fan the flames on mine. And so typical is where you try to tend to everybody else's fire. that you try to make your fire look like their fire. And instead, what I want to do is take what uniquely God has given me, two shots of fun, three shots of insecurity, a shot of winsome, so like whatever cocktail that is. I want to be that guy. And then you take whatever it is that God has turned you into and how you got there, a couple successes, a couple failures, but just figure out what that is. And if your listeners are doing that, that'll dazzle heaven to just go be who you are instead of figuring out. Now, I'm not saying don't look at what's going on in your neighbor who just got eaten by his pet, but learn from those things, but don't become the average of everybody around you because average is typical.
Yeah, and I believe we all have that inner voice. It's either in our brain or in our heart or both. And it's God talking to us through our subconscious or conscious saying, there's more. I've given you more. You're not using it. And I've been hearing that a lot over the last few years. And this is why I've sort of taken this leap of faith and have jumped into this thing. And I'm having so much fun with it. Now, if there's a way to make some money at it and keep food on the table, great. But I'm going to keep going. So what advice do you give to folks that feel that nudge or hear that voice that maybe are afraid to get in front of that fear?
Yeah, I would say I want to flip that question to you because you're just in the throes of that idea of being typical. In a former life, I was a trial lawyer. And so for 30 years, I would just argue with people. You get 12 jurors, two alternates, a bailiff with a gun, and a judge with a robe. Like that was what you would do. And so I early on decided I wasn't going to be a typical lawyer. Because typical lawyers, I imagine, are a little angsty, a little full of themselves, like maybe not reading the room very well, but just kind of making it about them. And I think an atypical person stops, like they're aware of what's going on around, but they just decided that I'm going to jump the tracks. Because maybe, like, take what you're doing right now. You decided to jump the tracks. You don't want to do what everybody else is doing. So what was your thought process getting there?
Yeah, so I mean, it was continuing to hear the messages that I already had heard myself from the outside, right? It was going to mass and having the priest say, you got to take that leap of faith. So you've got your mind on something, and then you hear a message from somewhere else, and and you've said this too. And I'm paraphrasing, I think you can give me the exact quote, but God answers prayers by sending you people. So while
Yeah.
you're praying or thinking on something, if it's starting to come from every direction, right, you can't help but say, okay, I get it. I'm going to try. And so I had a priest also say, let go and let God. So I basically have said, all right, I have these talents that I can use to make money, but I want to do more than make money. I want to make a difference. So I'm going to use them. And, every time I get a new job, God would say, yeah, it would end in 6 months because the company wasn't well funded or somebody made a mistake or whatever, or the economy was bad. And I'd say, what do you want me to do? And it's like, I've told you, I've given you these gifts and you're not using them the right way. Refocus and use them the right way. So I jumped into podcasting and posting things on the internet, and I'm getting good responses. I don't really check how many likes did I get. I don't care because, like we talked about, Jesus started with 12 guys and one of them didn't work out too well. So
Yeah, he only
you
got
know
11
that.
likes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what it's been for me. And what I try to do is encourage people to tap into that. Obviously, we have to balance responsibility and putting food on the table and keeping a roof over our heads. But
Yeah.
if you say, give us this day our daily bread, that really means give me enough to get through today
Yeah, bingo.
and we'll
I
figure out
think
tomorrow.
I think that's it. And then whatever your faith tradition or expression is, one thing is true, people will remember in the middle of a conflict who showed up. And so a lot of what love does is in conflict zones because people just remember who showed up. That doesn't make you the hero or the victim. It just makes you a participant. And I think that what God's looking for each of us is just participation. And you don't need to go across the ocean, go across the street. There's a
Yeah.
lot more stuff in the scriptures about going across the street and loving a neighbor than going across an ocean sounds noble, but going across the street to love your neighbor sounds obedient. And it's easy to like love somebody far away because you're like the big person that showed up. But to just on a Tuesday, to just love somebody or
Yeah.
maybe your work colleagues to just be a little kinder than you might have otherwise been. Like people aren't going to write books about that, but will be remembered that way.
Yeah.
Just that idea, we're known for our opinions, we're remembered for our love. And so I want to be like, what do you want to be remembered for? And then just go do a bunch of that.
Yeah. So what I tell people is maybe people isn't your thing. Maybe you want to help animals. So when you go buy your cat food or your dog food, get an extra bag and take it to the shelter. Just something
Yeah, wouldn't that be
that
awesome?
touches your heart, right?
Totally. I like that strategies. Like to have a great idea can feel like brain candy. It's just this idea. And I have lots of swell ideas. But as soon as we activate that, you buy the extra bag of kibble or you do, now you've got something, and then you don't need to turn everything you do into a program. You don't have to get matching hoodies that say, get a dog a kibble. Like just to do something because it'd be a swell idea.
Yeah. And then share that you did it. I used to think that charity should be private, but you can't ignite fire in somebody else's heart if you don't let them know here's an idea, right?
Yes. Yeah, I like it.
So in your book, Everyone Always, I think.
Oh yeah, everybody always.
Everybody always. I always say everyone. Um, you talk about loving without an agenda.
Yeah.
And we kind of touched on that. And I try to get into this topic of agape love, which is the love that God has for his children. And how do you approach people in everyday life with that attempt at agape love, which means you're going to get hurt sometimes, but if you really love that person, you'll keep loving them and forgive, but draw that boundary appropriately for them. We'll never get it perfect like he does, but what is your advice on that? Like, how do you love without an agenda when it seems to be everything's conditional?
Yeah, part of it is just kind of check yourself. Some people that are very enthusiastic about their faith, then they want to talk to other people and say, hey, I found something really neat. I think you should jump aboard this thing. It's really neat. But if you are hip to the fact that people get 5,000 advertisements a day that we're each exposed to, 38,000 decisions each one of us make every day. I just want somebody to feel like I'm an example, or just another advertisement for Jesus. And I really like the idea of saying, like, what if you just love someone with no agenda? The agenda isn't that they will believe what you believe or that you'll be getting some kind of validation by somebody agreeing on your position about, then insert here. Some people make the mistake of doing that in politics or in sports or whatever. Like if you think the whoever's cooler, I just wear this Red Sox hat because my neighbor before she died gave it to me. But that idea of knowing why you're doing what you're doing and to make sure, is this me seeking validation here? Am I seeking approval? Am I trying to be Jesus's lawyer here and talk somebody? Because some of the most insecure people I've met are people that come across as very convinced about whatever it is they're convinced about.
Yeah.
And so I just, rather than a word of correction, I just go like, sometimes I'll put my hand on their shoulder and say, you know what, I'm insecure too.
Yeah.
So,
So in Dream Big, which is a great motivating book as well, chapter 27, you talk about check your ropes, anchor yourself to the right things. So I found this very inspiring to me because in Gotta Look Up and in the book I'm writing with your guidance, Gotta Look Up, I talk about quicksand that we get into, and quicksand's sort of your current hell. And how do I get out of that? A lot of people thrash and they panic when you really have to calm down and focus on, in my opinion, what I call trees of joy. So what are the trees of joy around me? What are the things that make me happy that I can throw a rope to and tug on to slowly grab myself out of the situation? And then for the future, what are my anchors of hope? What are my dreams and aspirations that I want to go toward that put that quicksand in my rearview mirror? So I want to ask you, what would you consider to be your trees of joy and your anchors of hope?
Yeah, I think for me, a recurring theme is possibilities, like what might be possible. I'm not sure how that'll shake out, but if I could get into this area and talk to this person, what might be possible? And I'm just so comfortable with ambiguity, like just not knowing how that'll shake out. But the possibility that would be kind of in your vernacular tree of hope that you say, like, oh, dude, what if, we have a school in Afghanistan. And so the guy that runs, if you've seen 12 Men Strong, there's like a big leader in all of northern Afghanistan. And so we got in a Tercel, which is nuts, and went to meet with the guy. And I mean, he's pretty well protected. It's in this former capital of the Taliban. And so when we sat down in this big room that he was going to enter into, there was like a 7.3 magnitude earthquake, and the chandeliers were swaying. It was like one of those, like, oh my gosh. And I turned to him and I said, "You're a very powerful man." And he looked at me and he said, "Yes, I am." And there's something about in that moment, instead of it being weird, it was just a little bit less weird. It was still a little weird, but to live in anticipation that if you show up, there's going to be some really neat, unexpected outcomes. The neat, unexpected outcome, I got a girls' school with 200 little girls going to school where nobody else is
Yeah.
because we showed up at a Tercel and told that guy was what he already knew, which is he's a very powerful man. So there's something about being respectful and to be uh, have clarity about what you want, why you want that to happen, without putting your agenda on somebody else. And then there's something about living in anticipation. I mean, even take this courageous move you're making. You're going to do, you have all these talents and capabilities, but kind of like Cortez, you're just burning the ships and
Yeah.
just say, hey, I'm going to go in a different direction. We'll see what goes on. That's what adventurers do. That's probably what Lewis and Clark felt like every single morning. And they didn't know there was a place called Oregon at the end of it. They just kept moving west.
Yeah.
They knew the direction, not the destination.
Yeah, well, gotta keep going is one of my mottos, and probably the second book if I get the first one done, or when I do.
Yeah, come on,
Yeah.
go.
So I want to be conscious of time. I've got two more questions for you that are off the books, just focused on who you are. When the time comes to meet your maker, what are the three things you want people to remember you by?
Oh, that's great. You know what? I'd love for somebody listening to think of now, come up with your answer, because it doesn't matter what my answer is, but to say, if I really had three things I wanted to be remembered for, what would those be? So I would think it would be availability that we've talked about. It would be hopefully authenticity, that I don't try to be something I'm not. I didn't play a role. I wasn't a caricature of who I actually am. And then curiosity, that guy was always curious about, I wonder what would happen. And I remember even as a kid, I had, no eyebrows because they burned off in the last explosion because I'm just curious about stuff. So I want to be this old guy that's curious about stuff. What would happen if we could take the person who's most prickly, that we just actually, what we hold dearest is antithetical to everything they hold dearest. And if we could care for them in a way that we would want to be cared for, like if we could just, and there's nothing new about that. That's an ages old concept. It wasn't mine. But to somehow live into that and to then to find a challenging person, like I don't know how you deal with people in your life that are a little bit difficult, but sometimes people will say something super lame. They're just not reading the room. And I imagine over their head, in their thought bubble, their words would be, "I'm being super helpful right now," when they're actually not being helpful at all. But when I am a little bit more generous in how I see people and what they might be thinking that they're being really helpful, instead of saying, "I'm being super lame right now," because that's what's going on in my thought bubble. I would love to be remembered as a person that was a little bit more generous in my thoughts towards people.
Yeah. I
How
mean, for
about
me,
you? What's your three things?
yeah, for me, I think you kind of hit it on the head a little bit. Safe. I've had people tell me I'm safe, and
Yeah.
some people may say, well, that's a weakness, but no, it's something to aspire to, because that means that you provide a level of comfort and security when people are around you. I want to
Yeah.
be remembered as a good dad, if not great, or at least one that tried very hard. And not only for my two kids, but for reaching out to others that are less fortunate. My dad was big on this. Like my dad was a dad to a provider to more kids than I don't even know, because he used to give to St. Jude's Children's Hospital a lot. He used to get turkeys at Thanksgiving for people. So it's all these little things that I learned from him. And I think finally, just somebody who just tried their best to love people and see the best in them.
Yeah, yeah. I think Jesus looked at Peter right after he said that, he'd never even heard of Jesus, and the rooster's going off, and he called him a rock. Said, "You're a rock. I'm going to build the entire church on you," which is like sometimes when you're in a faith gathering, you don't get the sense that we're going to build the church on somebody that is least secure about their faith. That we are going to put somebody that at least pretends that they're absolutely positive about their faith. And I just really am just kind of reminded of that. So when somebody does something that's a little bit lame, to just say, hey, they're just working out the kinks. They're just working out different kinks than I'm working out right now.
Mm.
And that generosity and thought towards each other, it'll just keep your blood pressure down. Even in a season where there's some people that are saying some peculiar things, to just say, I don't need to figure out all that stuff. That's kind of over my pay grade. But what it could do is something about it. Like I could, head to a border that where there's some tension going on. I could go to a region where there's a tension. I could find, instead of taking on a debate about life and all that, I could just start another home where we have teenage girls that are moms. So you could avoid all the high level thinking about something and just do something that everybody would agree with is a great idea. And you're not doing it so everybody will agree with you. It's just like,
Right.
I don't know, man. I just would find all the conversations or arguments distracting, but we could bottle that energy and just actually go do something. That'd be
Yeah.
awesome. And we'd really
Well,
be helping people.
yeah, a recent revelation I came up with is because I've had situations, and we all have, where you get in these relationships and one person has, more power than the other, or is there for a while, has different agendas, whatever. I came up with the phrase, God gets to use me, but people don't.
Oh
So
yeah, that's
if he
right.
needs me to go do something for somebody, I'm all in. But once that turns into something where that person is taking advantage of it, then I have to draw that boundary, and that has to end. Um, so that's
Yeah, and there's a really beautiful way to air gap that, to just
yeah,
create a little space between you and whatever's become a distraction or some behaviors that are just lame. We call them toxic, but they're just lame.
yeah.
Like toxic somehow got in the air supply in so many different levels. But to just say, hey, they're just figuring out their stuff. I got my ish, you got your ish.
Yeah.
Just like, just figure it out.
Well, Bob, I could talk to you all day, but I know we don't have all day. So I just want to close out by saying, you say that God sends you people when he answers prayers. And he answered a prayer of mine when he sent the two people to chase me down to introduce me to you. Then I get to meet you, and I'm at your work. Now you're in
Ah,
my podcast. So
I'm
um,
just so glad, Tom, that we're in this together.
yeah,
And I just love your courage in saying it's the fifth miracle out of 37 that Jesus did. And he found a couple guys in a boat and he told them to push out a little deeper. And they
yeah,
thought it was a stupid idea. And it actually was a stupid idea, but it said they did it anyway. And I love that you're just pushing out. That takes some courage. And I would say for the people listening to this, to find a couple safe voices, Tom's one of them in my life, and then just push out a little deeper in yours. So don't just agree if Tom said something on this podcast that makes sense. Just go do it now. Like the water's on your side of the tub.
well, to paraphrase a great movie quote, I hope this is the start of a beautiful friendship.
Come on.
I
Come
will
on.
see
Let's do
you.
this thing.
I will see you at the Oaks again. And once I read another book of yours, let's do this again.
Okay. Done.
All
All
right.
right. So
Thank you,
long,
Bob.
Tom.
Take care. Bye. Thank you for joining us today on the Gotta Look Up podcast. Your support means everything to us. If our message today resonated with you, please share it with family and friends who would also be interested or might benefit from hearing this message. If you would like to be a part of the Gotta Look Up movement, please take a minute to subscribe to this podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or send us a note via our Facebook page or Instagram account. We are always looking for people with inspiring stories to share, so please reach out to us if you'd like to suggest a topic, interview guest, or wish to collaborate with Gotta Look Up. Make sure to leave your name and contact information so we can get in touch. Now, get off your screens, get outside, be an instrument of peace and love, and make someone smile today. Gotta look up.